The earth fell under subjugation from the fruit of a human-non-human alliance. There was mind control through media and entertainment, horrible persecution of the non-compliant, mass murder of the deceived, and death on a scale beyond belief. Millions died in horrible, unnatural ways. There were signs and portents visible everywhere in the skies, and then, seen again on the media platform of phones in every palm, daily events spoke of supernatural powers and other than human creatures. There were signs in the sun and the moon and the constellations. Nations reacted in perplexity at the events and changes coming on the earth. The chilling of men from fear and apprehension of that which was coming on the inhabited earth came with seeing that the powers of the heaven had been shaken. Humans at first lived in terror. Then, negotiating with those they feared, the species moved to live subject, passive lives, and finally, they adapted to their newly imposed slavery. There was an exchange of freedom for security, a trade of security for a relative peace and prosperity. And in the final episode, the humans simply exchanged compliance for the hope of not being killed. Loyalty, obedience, and a fawning worship were the currency that kept the family intact and limbs attached. The Last Days of Adar, 59:99, from Adam. In a great wave, a race of immortals appeared in the lands of the Middle East. They seemed to come as part of the final elemental throes and the rush of plagues that visited Earth. It was said they came to battle the oppressors of the earth and turn its frail humans to their unknown God. Some of the human species had shifted allegiance to love the slavers, and thus there were millions of humans who fought the liberating immortals. The unwitting traitors sided with the ones that people had learned to call demons. There was a butcher's bill extracted by the liberating immortals. The payment was specific, drastic, painful, and worldwide. Hundreds of millions of mortal beings died for their treachery and the villainy against their own kind and for their efforts against the race of immortal children of El. Billions on the earth died because of the combat, disasters, and weapons used. Though the traitors were deceived by the craft and the wonder of the demon oppressors, ultimately most were taken in because of their dark hearts. They had no excuse and were offered no protection. They died because of what they wanted most. They desired to be someone of status and stature, their own God. They died for what they found in themselves, what they wished to elevate and protect. They died in ignominy, debased, and vulnerable, but their death wasn't permanent. The conflict raged until a final battle in the valley north of the Immortals' beachhead near Jerusalem. The oppressor forces and their demonic allies were crushed in such a one-sided victory that it became apparent that the immortal ones, called the body of Christ, had been attempting to bring mercy and grace into the war. The deep cleanup took years. The biggest part was accomplished in 75 days, though. The solar micronova, CME of 5995 FA, had destroyed all the major nodes of worldwide electrical grid. A massive crustal displacement that moved every island and mountain out of place and left every structure on the planet either damaged or destroyed was just another shock to the Earth before the world changed. The collateral damage from the plague of horrors destroyed most of the remaining infrastructure of the planet, but it did not remain a chaos. In a short time, the immortals nursed the remaining mortal nations and their people back to life, and eventually to prosperity. The Immortals insisted on, and assisted with, fairness, justice, freedom, and faith. They brought reforms into all the processes of the planet, from education to finance. A strange paradise grew with the Immortals, always pointing toward a loving benefactor instead of themselves. The nature of animal life changed. Not only did feeding predation cease, but even parasitic disease and pest-borne sickness were ended. Peace overflowed the earth at all levels. Wolf pups could be seen suckling the ample supply of the milk of ewes. It was still Earth. It was still hard work to live on the planet, but not like before the Immortals came. The hard work almost always produced fruit, literal and figurative. There were grapes 8 inches across, not 8 inches for a bunch, but a single grape. There was food, peace, wealth, and health for all to attain with meaningful labor and by request. Almost every family ran their own profitable business. Enterprises that were not profitable were designed to provide a service. Those humans were elevated as servants and were provisioned and cared for as a family member instead of being paid. And their increase came in the form of the ample provision. The Immortals brought knowledge of energy sources that didn't consume materials to produce energy. The system just generated electricity. Eventually it was noted that people ceased to die in their youth, and youthful health extended well beyond 90 years. It took several years to become apparent, but people lived over 100 years with ease. They were healed when they were sick or injured, and only rarely did someone succumb to the pull of decay. Most people who died by accidents were made whole and raised back to life. The role of administration on the planet shifted to the meek and the loving of the world. Governance was decentralized as more and more people came to trust and understand how the Immortals wanted things to work. Information traveled slower without the tools of deception used by the demons. So the nations on the fringe, farthest from Jerusalem, were less devout and progressed the least. Sadly, as at all times, many people saw their new liberators as just another form of oppressor. Dissenting individuals and nations were not attacked or destroyed by the Immortals, but the skies of those nations that resisted the new order, those skies did not produce rain, at least not until the people submitted to a right and just rule. Who were these beings? As news and information trickled down into the common awareness, it became known that the humans who once led armies or corporations were no longer models or examples of success. Those who would murder and those who persisted in lawbreaking were publicly removed from the living and then destroyed in fire, after very visible trials. Psychopaths went into hiding in a state of affairs where their powers of persuasion were not only visible for all to see, but also no longer viewed as admirable. They relocated to the four corners of the earth, to the nations least disposed toward those who rule from Jerusalem. The world settled into a rhythm. Then things changed. A test from God? Something unexpected or out of the control of the Immortals? At the time of the discovery, the Immortals had ruled for over 980 years. The knowledge of God, the Creator El, covered the earth and was deep and evident to all the inhabitants of the surface. But in all there was knowledge, but not in all was faith. After almost 1,000 years of prosperity, freedom, and peace, the world was gripped by cosmic horror. From the depths of space, an anomaly appeared. In a tragic revelation, the world of mortals was gripped with an impending extinction. The visible light evidence of a gamma ray burst told the humans that in less than 14 years, their only planet would be bathed in a murderous wash of energy that would kill all flesh. The mortals, believing that they had been misled by their protectors, the Immortals, rebelled in a self-destructive whirlwind. Industries sprung into existence to attempt a planetary escape and to build the tools needed to fight for the resources and labor to escape. The wealth and knowledge of almost 1,000 years produced tools and powers unimaginable before. Never heeding the calls of faith, peace, and trust given by the Immortals, the world sought to save itself in its own power, and the wars began again. Eventually, forgetting the new order, humanity descended into a foolish attack on the very headquarters of the Immortals in Jerusalem. The loss of life was quick and painless, but universal for all who followed in the era. After the wars, and the destruction born in the fears of the human flesh, few were left alive. In the last year before the event, the unbelieving remainder died in the deprivation and chaos that remained of a kingdom called Millennial Israel. After 1,000 years of lawful prosperity, the wave of gamma ray energy smashed into a planet that was already lifeless from the lack of trust in the Immortals. The particle storm exploded more powerfully than any believed possible, rendering the elements of the local arm of the Milky Way to their constituent particles. Hydrogen, helium, a fervent eruption of plasma left only constituent elements in a sphere 144 light years in radius, around a brown dwarf star that was part of the Centauri group. Until the visible light had appeared 14 years earlier, it was believed that a star of its type could not deliver that level of shredding. And there were formed then a new heaven and a new earth.